Well, we're back, and it's hard to believe a month's passed. Karen's here with me again to answer your questions. Just firstly, I just want to say huge thank you to everybody who submitted questions this time again, and also thank you for your feedback on the first podcast last time. But here we go with the second one.
Well, Craig, can you believe it's been a month?
I know.
And we've had all these questions in from your constituents, which is absolutely brilliant. So we had a chat, didn't we, before we started about how we might start off. And I think it'd be quite good to get just an overview from you about this month in Parliament, because there's been a lot going on. It's been another busy month, hasn't it?
Well, it has. And I mean, I think a bit quieter than usual because, as you know, for the last week, you've been stuck with me at home because we've had
You're
a
on recess.
recess. Yeah, so which means there's still plenty to do, but we just don't have to be in London. But still, actually, it was, when I was looking back, there was still quite a bit that had actually gone on in that time. I think probably the main bit of legislation that went through was the offshore petroleum bill, rather nattily titled. But the view of that is that I think we want to try and push towards cleaner energy, but the reality is it's going to be decades before we can actually get round to doing that. So we have to have a strategy. Probably should have been done a long time ago, this, but a strategy to protect that in the short to medium term.
Yeah.
And obviously what that does is it protects, it's around about 200,000 people are employed in that sector, in the gas and oil sector, but also it also unlocks billions of quid's worth of investment coming in. So government's acted, it had to put in a new bit of legislation to do that and to licence potentially drilling new oil fields. So that's done. Also, a bit of a niche one, but I think it was quite interesting that Singapore ratified the UK's membership of the, again, very short, nattily titled CPTPP.
That's a bit like your initials, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
CPTTP.
Yeah, it's basically how I remember it. But what that stands for, it's the Comprehensive, I've got to look at note for that, Comprehensive Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. But essentially what it does, it unlocks around £12 trillion worth of business for the UK to deal with USA, but also some of the emerging markets, Singapore, like I mentioned, but places like Mexico and some of these countries that are up and coming. And what it does once we get full membership, it would give us tariff-free access to those markets. So it's really quite an exciting thing. It doesn't get as much coverage as it should do, I don't think. But
I must admit, you probably haven't seen as much coverage about that.
Yeah.
So it's good to hear all these.
And it's one to watch out for. There was also an amendment to the Criminal Justice Bill. I think Idris Elba did a bit on this. But what we've done now is actually ban zombie knives, which, again, it's amazing to think that this wasn't already in legislation, but it required a specific bit of legislation to do that. So they've now been banned as well.
Well, knife crime's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, huge and concern. So, everything we can do to get that drilled down, the better. Also, as I'm sure you're aware, the Northern Ireland Assembly has now reconvened.
Yeah.
Some really good work. It's good news, I think, for the long-term security of Northern Ireland, but also Ireland as an island and the UK. It's really good news for that. So I'm pleased to see that. The national insurance cuts, we all like to see those hit our pockets. They were announced in the budget. They've actually come into effect from the end of January, so people should start to be seeing the benefits of those, that 2%. That on average, somebody on an average salary, whatever an average salary means, I don't think there's any such thing as an average salary, but it's around about £450 a year better off there would be. Then just this week, the new inflation figures were announced. Inflation has remained static at 4%, but the bad news is that we have now also entered into a technical recession.
A technical recession. So my understanding of a recession is that there's a decrease in growth over 3 quarters. So my layperson's understanding is that. So is that a technical recession?
Yeah, well, there's actually no actual definition of what a recession or a technical recession is, but the normally approved method is that it's 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth,
Right. Okay.
which is what we've had. It looks like on this particular one, the main driver is that inflation is still high, so that stifles investment. So we need to get that down. It has come down from 11% to, as I say, around about 4%, but it's still above the Bank of England target, which is 2%. I suppose the positive news is that the analysts, and I'm not an economic expert by any way, shape, or form, but the analysts and the people that we talk to expect it to be short-lived. And I suppose where it differs from, what we would class as an actual long-term recession is that the unemployment rates for the country are still very low, and the wages are rising and have done for the last 6 months higher than inflation. Okay. So actually, it's not as bad as it sounds, but it's obviously not somewhere we particularly want to be.
But obviously a serious thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But we still are expected to grow more quickly than Japan, Germany, France, and Italy.
Well, that's great news. Well, that's good to hear. So I mean, that's quite a list. There's been a lot going on. It's quite it's quite good to hear all of the different things. For your constituents to hear about all the different things that you're involved with, and I'm sure many of them have got
that's a quiet.
Okay, all right. Well, obviously this is about engaging your constituents so that they can get their questions into you. And as I said, we've got lots in, which is absolutely brilliant. So do keep those coming. So I'm going to start with my first one. That's from a lady called Janet. And her concern is around schools and problems in schools in terms of, young people using social media and that creating bullying and issues in schools. So she has said, what can be done to make schools more safer for young people around that situation? And actually, Janet has asked, when will government actually take action and ban mobile phones in schools?
I think it's an interesting question. It's very topical at the moment.
Very. And it's something that affects every family, doesn't it?
And I mean, what I would say, first of all, I think we are really lucky with our schools in North Warwickshire and Bedworth. We've got some amazing teachers, some amazing head teachers. I do a lot of work with them. And, we're probably better off than a lot of other places are. Schools have a responsibility themselves for developing their own behaviour plans and obviously ensure that their students are as safe as possible. That said, there is always government support there that enables them to do that, and advice as well if they need that support. Some of the interventions, there was a £10 million invested in behaviour hubs, and I think that went to around 700 schools. And also there was a behaviour task force introduced. There was a 2017 review into pupils' behaviour. So that's some of the things that around the schools do. But I think the main one that I think, going back to Janet's point around just general behaviour and that responsibility, is that now there's been a new Ofsted framework introduced, and part of that is that it includes an assessment for the schools on how they look at behaviour and culture within the school, and then also where there is bullying, how they've responded to that and how they've reacted. So I think there's a really good,
But government banning mobile phones in schools, are you saying that that's not on the cards?
It's not. We're not planning to legislate at the moment. What I would say is
because of all those things you've got in place.
But also there is evidence around the detriment effect mobile phones have just on kids learning in general. And the Department of Education have just recently published new guidance for schools that tells them what they should be doing.
Okay.
They have then said that if the schools don't implement these and there's not an improvement, then they will legislate if necessary. But
so let's see. So there's guidance. Let's see what they do, and if not,
absolutely,
that might come.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. So we've got a question here from a resident in Atherstone, and it's about the high street actually, and I'm a lover of Atherstone High Street, as I'm sure many people who live in Atherstone are as well, and outside of that. But apparently, the question, the person asking the question talks about the number of empty units in Atherstone's High Street and the risk of these not being available to small businesses, because small businesses are the lifeblood, aren't they? Not only of the country but certainly of small towns like Atherstone. And so the question is about that, and that being a risk, and also restrictions, and having restrictions so that important and listed buildings are protected and are not touched.
Yeah, well, I'm a former high street business owner. You've got a business on a high street.
I certainly have, yeah.
It's so big interest on this, and it's been good to us. I think what we have to recognise first and foremost, that there has been a change in general about how people setting up business think about whether they need a premises. There's also a change in habits from consumers. Digital retailers, Amazon, for example, and I think particularly over COVID, where people couldn't go out, then that things shifted. But I'm still adamant that there is definitely a place for high street, and the high street is such a good place for people to do the business.
And we want them to attract small businesses, don't we? We want those units to have small businesses in, don't we?
And I think this is where localism comes in, that government having a view. You look in my constituency, Atherstone, Coleshill, Bedworth, 3 towns, 3 very different communities.
Yeah.
The local councils are really the best ones to know how to deal with that, rather than government mandating. So that's why government, through Levelling Up Fund, has been giving money to councils to help with that. But I think the interesting one just around the empty shops, and again that is something that worries me, and government has obviously addressed that. We're working on an act of Parliament at the moment, which is a Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. But what that's going to give is new powers for local authorities. Where a property's been empty for a while, it would give the owner a number of months to try and lease it out. But then, if they choose to take advantage of the powers, what they could then do is put it out to tender to local businesses and local communities for them to rent. So you're not sitting with people having stock of empty shops on the high street. So I think this would be really powerful, but it is up to local authorities whether they take advantage of it. It will be it's not a compulsory scheme for them to sign up for, but I'd like to see that.
Well, obviously that's the thing for that person to look out for, and nobody wants to see a town, especially a town like Atherstone, to have that look of empty shops. And
I think just on that, we're seeing with. It'd be interesting to see how Tesco's now. I'm already hearing from people outside the area how Tesco's bring people in, and then they're discovering Atherstone as a sort of a new place.
It is a draw, isn't it? And they can work in harmony.
You go to Tesco's, and then you go to Beatrice's, you go to Toolbox, you go to the Computer Solutions.
Get them all mentioned, Craig. They'll all be saying, "Why didn't you?"
Chalk and linen down the bottom.
Chalk and linen. I hope you got a mention.
And I'm sure they don't want to go to Evans's.
All right, okay, let's move on because time is ticking on. So I've got a question here about Polesworth. So we quite a quick question. What are you doing to improve the rail services to Polesworth Station, and when is it going to be?
So interestingly, and if I was up to speed, I'd have brought my survey in that we've just done.
You've been surveying Polesworth, haven't you?
Yeah. So and the reason for that is, off the back of HS2 being cancelled, the government said £36 billion that's been saved will go into transport services in the North and the Midlands. So what I want to try and do is make sure we get our fair share. Polesworth Station is the obvious one that is underutilised at the minute. 1 service a day, you can go from there, but you can't get back there.
Ridiculous.
But with so what we're doing is we're doing surveys. People can take part on my website or Facebook page. We've delivered about 1,000 of them so far across Polesworth, and we'll be getting more out soon. But it's basically, do people want to see the existing station better used? would they prefer a parkway station, or are they not in favour of a station?
So the
at
answer to the
Bosworth?
question is you're still consulting,
Still.
and if they've got views, they need to take part in the consultation.
Yeah, and Warwickshire County Council will be opening a consultation up. There's a lot of consultations going on at the minute, but they'll be opening a consultation up in the first half of the year on a parkway station. But that's just purely looking at that. What I want to look at is a bit more holistically what other solutions there are.
Great, so there's lots going on and there's lots in place
lots.
for Polesworth Station. Fantastic. All right, okay. So, there's a question here about the fire service, and we all, really, really feel strongly about our emergency services, don't we? But further to the recent consultation regarding the restructuring of the fire service in Warwickshire, and a lot of people have been talking about this and hearing about it. What do people need to know about this, Craig? Why is it important? What's the situation with this? Because this is quite a big one, isn't it?
So it's an ongoing consultation. Warwickshire Fire Service have identified that they need to review how they deliver services, particularly their on-call model. It's the retained fire service. They've been struggling on recruitment, and so they brought a company in who modelled an average risk across the whole of Warwickshire. But one of the things they've identified is that there is less risk at night. So proposal is to put more resource in during the day. That will have implications for the 4 fire stations. We've got fire stations in Atherstone, Bedworth, Coleshill and Polesworth. They all operate on slightly different models, but each one of them would see a new operating model under that. So they are doing a review. Unfortunately, public interest in it or public participation in the consultation has been quite low, so we're trying to beef that up and get more people.
So again, more engagement from the constituents about consultation would be good.
So I'm running my own sessions. The first one was, well, as we're watching this now, it would have been last Saturday in Polesworth. But we're doing them where each of the fire stations is, where it gives people an overview of what's actually going to happen, how they can take part, and put it into layman's terms in terms of what those changes are, because it is a bit, some of the language on there is a bit confusing, like, what's a surge station, what's a what's a returned firefighter. But what I would say is it closes on the 10th of March. Please try and take part if you can, because it's such an important thing for our area, and I just want to make sure that people have the opportunity to have their say.
Fabulous, and having this platform, it's really good to talk about those consultations that people might not really know about. So very, very important.
Well, I think often people get involved with them after they close and then say we can't do anything about it. So what I'm just trying to do is really highlight the opportunity to take part now.
You've done it. And we talked a lot about Polesworth today, so we haven't left you out, Bedworth. So come on, send your questions in Bedworth, send your questions in Coleshill and all the surrounding villages, all of these. So we're only mentioning Polesworth so much because we've heard so much from them. So well done, Polesworth. So last one, Craig, from Bob. Quick one. After 14 years of Conservative government, what's improved since 14 years?
It's a good question. I mean, it's an
interesting one. You get asked that a lot, don't you?
You do, yeah. And I think you see here one of the challenges that government have, that people are very quickly thinking on to the next thing. They move on very quickly. If you look in that time, 2010 when we came in, there was no money. We know that. We were off the back of a recession. Then we had COVID, and then the government gave out around about 400 billion in grants and also furlough to protect businesses, but also to project jobs. Then we've had Ukraine, which is it's not been the easiest time to be in Parliament, and I don't think it's my fault. Some of them coincided with that, but it has been a really challenging time. Any government would have that. But I think what I'm really proud of is, even off the back of that, there has been, I think, some really measurable improvements. So between 2010 and now, there's 4 million more people in work than there was in 2010.
Yeah.
An interesting one on taxes, and again we forget this, that back in 2010 you started paying tax when you earned your first £6,475. Now that threshold today, we've raised that to 12,570, and it'll go up again in April. Triple lock introduced for pensioners, which now an extra £800 a year better off that pensioners will be under that. On schools, we talked about schools earlier on. In 2010, there was 68% schools in good or that were good or outstanding. Now that's 88%. And also, I think, one of the things I'm really passionate about with my breast cancer chair role is around a long-term plan for the NHS workforce. There's never been a plan to think about how many people we're going to need in the future, what those jobs look like, how we fill the gaps. So we've now got, since 2010, 39,000 more doctors and 55,000 more nurses, but actually with a plan forward to make sure that we don't get in the situation that we've been in, where those people can't be trained overnight. So we have to have a long-term plan. So that's a snapshot of what I'd say.
It is a bit of a snapshot. Employment tax threshold, triple lock, better schools, and more doctors and nurses. Just not my microphone.
Oh, dear me.
Sorry about that. That's me first mistake of my podcast. Thank you, Craig. Well, time's beat us again. As we used to say in the RAF, we've overshot the runway a little bit by time. I hope you forgive us for that, but we want to get in as many questions as we can from you all. So, do send your questions in. Of course, Craig, any last words from you?
No, just thank you. I thought it was really interesting. There's some great questions. Please do keep them coming in, and you can see we are using them. Leave your feedback. Let us know what you think. If there's things that we do better or things you'd like to see, and importantly, just let us know if you think I didn't answer the question as well. So brilliant. Well, thank you all again, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
See you soon. Send your questions.